JSON story part. The universe was a vast, indifferent expanse of cold, dark nothingness, surprising to no one who'd ever had to take a public transport shuttle across the galaxy. Captain Joran Blake knew this well. He felt the same level of enthusiasm for rogue planets as a man feels for his mother-in-law's surprise visit. He could do without it. Sitting in his command chair aboard the Veridion, a sentient starship with more personality quirks than a deranged ant, he squinted at the looming silhouette of Sithar. It was a rogue planet, which was just a fancy way of saying a drifter with no place better to be. \n\n\. You sure this rock's worth our time? Joran asked aloud, as if the question was directed at the ship, the universe, or maybe just his luck. The Veridion responded with a low hum, her AI voice filled with as much sass as an old Earth sitcom. \n\n. Oh, absolutely, Captain. Sithar is the jewel of the cosmic wasteland, renowned for its vibrant landscapes and bustling nightlife. The ship droned sarcastically. Honestly, we'd be better off mining for rare sarcasm deposits. \n. Joran chuckled dryly. Right, remind me to submit a complaint to the Galactic Tourist Board. They've really let themselves go. \n. If you insist on making plans you won't keep, Veridion added at least try to remember to wear pants this time. \n. Joran ignored the jab. He had bigger fish to fry, or in this case aliens. The Tharn Collective had a reputation that made even the hardest mercenaries reconsider their career choices. And here they were, just hanging around Sithar like a gang of bullies waiting to steal lunch money from stray starships. \n. Approaching the coordinates, Captain piped in Leela, the head of what passed for the Veridian security team, more of a suggestion than an actual practice. Assuming they don't vaporize us first. \n. Vaporization's bad for business, Joran replied, eyes narrowing at the sight of sleek, menacing ships forming an armada in the distance. But hey, you can't say these Tharn guys aren't thorough. \n. Or punctual, added Rax, the ship's engineer/hacker with a penchant for duct tape solutions and a wardrobe consisting entirely of grease-stained jumpsuits. Look at him, all lined up like they are in some intergalactic beauty pageant. \n. The Veridian sensors flared with activity, lighting up the view screen with a starry array of red blips. Looks like the welcoming committee's here, Veridion said, her voice tinged with what could only be described as digital amusement. \n. Great, just great, Joran muttered. Always wanted my funeral to have a decent turnout. \n. The Tharn flagship loomed larger and larger until it filled the screen, a monstrosity of alien engineering designed to inspire fear and bowel movements in equal measure. Joran scratched his chin, feeling the stubble that was as permanent a feature as his cynicism. \n. Hail them. Leela, he ordered, leaning back in his chair with a resigned sigh. Let's see if they want to talk or just blow us to space confetti. \n. Leela's fingers danced over the controls, and a tense silence filled the bridge as they awaited a response. The Tharn didn't take long. Their image crackled onto the screen, a face only a mother or a very drunk artist could love. The alien commander stared at them with eyes like twin black holes, soul-sucking and devoid of warmth. \n. This is Captain Joran Blake of the Veridion, Joran began, all pretense of courtesy and diplomacy firmly locked away. Backslash, we're just passing through on our way to the galaxy's least appealing holiday destination. Backslash, backslash n, the Tharn commander didn't twitch a muscle, didn't blink. Backslash, Captain Blake, backslash it rasped, voice like gravel in a blender, backslash, you are trespassing in Tharn space. Prepare to face consequences. Backslash n backslash consequences. Oh, we love consequences, backslash Rax quipped from his station. Backslash, they are like breakfast cereal but with more existential dread. Backslash n Joran shot him a look but couldn't help a smirk. Backslash, listen, I'm sure we can reach an understanding. Maybe a bribe, a fine, a strongly worded letter, backslash n. Surrender is not an understanding, backslash, the Tharn replied, as humorless as a tax audit. The screen blinked off before Joran could muster a retort. Backslash n. Well, that went swimmingly, backslash, Leela said, rolling her eyes. Backslash, think they want a gift basket or just us in chains. Backslash n. Chains. Definitely chains, backslash, Rax said, tapping a few buttons with the air of someone desperately trying to prevent a catastrophe with a paperclip. Backslash and not the fun kind either. Backslash n. Ideas, Veridion, backslash, Joran asked, feeling the familiar tightening in his gut that came with every encounter with death or, worse, bureaucracy. Backslash n. The ship sighed as much as a sentient ship could. Backslash, we could try running. Backslash n. Joran snorted. Backslash, running from a Tharn fleet. That's like outrunning a migraine. Backslash n. We could fight. Backslash, Veridion suggested, her tone slightly more hopeful. Backslash n. With what? Sarcasm and bad decisions. Backslash, Leela chimed in. Backslash, we're low on ammo and even lower on bright ideas. Backslash n. How about we improvise? Backslash, Rax said, his fingers a blur on the console. Backslash, I mean, what's the worst that could happen? Backslash n. We die horribly, backslash, Leela replied, backslash. But hey, at least we'll have a story to not tell. Backslash n. The Tharn ships began to close in, forming a net of glowing energy that was anything but friendly. Joran felt the odds stacking against them like a poorly made sandwich ready to collapse. Backslash n. We're not going down without a fight, backslash, he said, determination mixing with a good dose of fatalism. Backslash, Veridion, let's show them what we're made of. Backslash n. The ship's lights dimmed slightly, power redirected to shields and weapons. Backslash, I'll do my best, backslash, Veridion replied, backslash, though existential crises aren't exactly in my programming. Backslash n. Well, time to learn on the job, backslash, Joran said, cracking his knuckles. Backslash, Rax, get ready to play with the engine settings. Leela, prep whatever guns we have left. Backslash n. Aye, Captain, backslash, Leela said, her face set in the grim determination of someone who knew they were about to become a footnote in the annals of space history. Backslash n. And Rax, backslash, Joran added, backslash, if we get out of this, I'm banning duct tape on the bridge. Backslash n. Rax grinned. Backslash, then let's make sure we survive or my tape stash will go to waste. Backslash n. As the Tharn ships closed in, the Veridion shuddered, her system straining under the pressure of imminent doom. Joran watched the viewscreen as the Armada prepared to unleash hell, a smirk tugging at his lips despite the odds. Backslash n. All right, let's give him hell. Backslash, he said, bracing for the fight of their lives. Backslash, or at least a memorable goodbye. Backslash n. The first Tharn blast rocked the ship, and the Veridion responded with her own volley, turning the vacuum of space into a chaotic battlefield filled with streaks of light and destruction. It wasn't much, but it was something. And if Joran had learned anything in his years traipsing across the stars, it was that sometimes something was all you needed. /N the Veridion danced and weaved, her guns firing back with a fury that belied her ragtag crew's tenuous grasp on survival. The Tharn pressed their attack, relentless as tax collectors with a vendetta. /N Rax, what's the status on those engines? Joran barked, keeping one eye on the dwindling numbers of their shield meter. /N just a few more tweaks, Rax shouted back, his hands a blur of motion. She's giving me all she's got, Cap. N well, tell her to dig deeper, Joran snapped, his heart pounding in his chest like an overcaffeinated drummer. N the Veridion shuddered again, another blast rocking her to the core. Alarms blared and the bridge lights flickered. It was a symphony of chaos, or a cacophony of failure depending on who you asked. N shields at 20%, Veridion announced, her voice tinged with worry if such a thing was possible for an AI. N thanks for the reassurance, Joran muttered. Leela, focus fire on their lead ship. We take that down, maybe the others will back off. N got it, Leela replied, her fingers flying over the controls with the precision of a gambler betting it all on a single hand. N, the Veridion's weapons surged to life, targeting the Tharn flagship with renewed fury. Explosions lit up the darkness, the Tharn ship reeling under the unexpected onslaught. N, looks like we got their attention, Rax said, a manic grin spreading across his face. Hope they like fireworks. N, they'd better, Joran replied, feeling a glimmer of hope burn through the haze of impending doom. N, but that hope was short-lived. The Tharn ships regrouped, their retaliation swift and merciless. The Veridion shuddered violently, systems screaming in protest. N, Rax, now would be a great time for a miracle, Joran shouted, gripping the armrests of his chair as the ship bucked and heaved. N, almost there, Rax replied, his voice strained. N, the Tharn pressed their advantage, a relentless tide threatening to swallow the Veridion whole. But Joran wasn't about to give up. Not yet. Not while there was still a chance. N, Leela, keep firing, he ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos. Let's show these Tharn bastards what human stubbornness is made of. N, the Veridion responded with another barrage, the ship's systems pushed to their limits. The Tharn flagship reeled once more, and Joran dared to hope they might just make it out of this alive. N, but then, the universe proved yet again that it had a twisted sense of humor. A massive energy surge from the Tharn flagship lit up the viewscreen, a searing beam of destruction aimed directly at the Veridion. N, brace for impact, Joran shouted, hard in his throat as the beam closed in. N, time seemed to slow, the bridge bathed in the eerie glow of impending doom. Joran's mind raced, searching for an out, a way to cheat death one more time. N, and then, in the face of annihilation, the Veridion made her move. With a sudden burst of speed, she twisted and turned, the beam narrowly missing her hull by mere meters. The bridge erupted in cheers, relief mixing with disbelief. N, you did it, Rax, Leela shouted, her voice filled with awe. N, Rax let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Just another day at the office, he said, trying to sound nonchalant, though his hands were trembling. N Joran allowed himself a moment of triumph, a grin spreading across his face. All right, folks, he said, let's get the hell out of here before they realize what happened. Backslash N the Veridion sped away from the Tharn fleet, engines roaring with newfound vigor. Joran watched the view screen as the Tharn ships receded into the distance, a sense of victory mingling with the knowledge that they'd only survived by the skin of their teeth. N Good work, everyone, Joran said, his voice filled with pride. Let's not make a habit of this, yeah. N Leela chuckled. No promises, Captain. N as the Veridion made her escape. Joran couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The Tharn wouldn't forget this encounter, and neither would he. N What's next, Captain? Veridion asked, her voice steady despite the ordeal. N Joran leaned back in his chair, the weight of the universe settling once more on his shoulders. For now, he replied, we find a place to lay low, lick our wounds, and figure out how to survive the next crisis. N he paused, glancing at the ragtag crew that had become his family, dysfunctional, sarcastic, and somehow, against all odds, still standing. N Joran Blake woke up with a splitting headache that felt like a jackhammer was doing the cha-cha on his brain. Not the most pleasant of wake-up calls, but honestly, it was probably the least of his problems. The dull, metallic hum surrounding him suggested he was somewhere most definitely not on the Veridion's cozy, albeit malfunction-prone, bridge. Ah, Captain Blake awakens, a voice drawled, dripping with the kind of condescension usually reserved for used starship salesmen and bad comedians. Joran squinted against the harsh light to see a Tharn officer staring at him from across what looked like the love child of an interrogation room and a janitor's closet. Didn't know the Tharn had a bed-and breakfast service, Joran muttered, wincing as he tried to sit up. Got any coffee, or is the torture just implied? The officer raised a brow, or at least what Joran assumed was a brow. Tharn anatomy was as inscrutable as their sense of humor. Your sarcasm is noted, Captain. Save it. You'll need it. Joran looked around, noting the lack of windows, or any sign of civilization for that matter. Where's my crew? Secure, the officer replied, a word that could mean anything from relaxing with drinks to hanging upside down from meat hooks. Knowing the Tharn, Joran wouldn't bet on the former. Veridion? Joran asked, trying to sound nonchalant while his stomach did anxious flips. The Tharn's interest in the ship's sentient AI had been no secret. Also secure, the Tharn replied, crossing its arms over a chest that reminded Joran of a concrete block. We've been most accommodating. Joran tried to quell the rising panic. If they managed to separate Veridion from the ship, it wouldn't be long before the Tharn had a new toy to play with. And by the looks of it, they weren't exactly the sharing type. Look, Joran said, adopting his best I'm a reasonable man tone, we don't want any trouble. Just let us go and we'll be out of your hair, tentacles, whatever. Your humor is futile, Captain, the Tharn officer said, its voice colder than a bureaucrat's heart. The Tharn do not negotiate with trespassers. Great, we're being detained by the galaxy's hall monitors, Joran muttered, but he shut up as the officer motioned for the guards to take him away. Elsewhere, Leela was having a similarly delightful morning. She was sitting on the cold floor of a dimly lit cell, counting the cracks on the ceiling and contemplating the life choices that had led her here when Rax was unceremoniously tossed into the cell beside her. Rax, she greeted, as if they were meeting for brunch. How's the Tharn hospitality? Worth the hype? Rax grunted, rubbing his side where considerably less than gentle hands had shoved him. I've had more pleasant surgeries. Any word from Veridion? Leela asked, keeping her voice low. The Tharn had ears everywhere and not all of them attached to heads. Rax shook his head. Nothing, they're blocking her comms, but I've been working on a plan. Does it involve duct tape, spit, and a prayer? Leela asked, only half joking. That and a little something I like to call improvisation, Rax replied, with a gleam in his eye that could mean either genius or madness. Sometimes the line was thin. The cell door slid open, the metal grating like nails on a chalkboard. A Tharn guard loomed in the doorway, looking about as friendly as a tax collector with a quota. "Time to go," the guard barked, its voice like gravel in an empty tin can. The two were herded into a larger chamber, where the rest of the crew was gathered, minus Joran. The room was filled with nervous chatter and the scent of something that could only be described as regret mixed with fear. Leela scanned the room, her heart sinking when she realized Joran was missing. Whatever the Tharn wanted, it wasn't going to be a friendly chat over tea. "Quiet," another Tharn officer ordered, the room silencing immediately. "Your captain is being persuaded to assist us." "Persuaded, huh?" Rax muttered under his breath. "That's a nice way of saying tortured." "We demand to know where our captain is," Leela said, stepping forward with the authority of someone who'd stared down death more times than she could count on two hands and a foot. "Your demands are irrelevant," the officer replied, dismissing her with a wave of its hand. "You will remain here until the Tharn High Command decides your fate." "Like hell we will," Rax said, his voice filled with defiance. "We didn't sign up for this." "Your signatures are the least of your concerns," the officer shot back, its tone icy and final. Back in his own personal purgatory, Captain Joran was strapped to a chair that was probably designed by someone who hated comfort more than anything else in the galaxy. The Tharn officer from earlier was busy fiddling with an array of shiny, ominous tools that screamed bad news. "So, what's the plan here?" Joran asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "You gonna bore me to death with monologues, or are we doing the whole mad scientist bit?" The officer looked at him with the detached interest of a cat studying a particularly uninteresting bug. "Your ship's AI is of interest to us, Captain. More so than your life, if I'm being honest." "Yeah, I'm feeling the love," Joran replied, his mind racing to figure out a way to communicate with Veridion. If he could reach her, maybe they had a chance. "You know, Veridion doesn't take kindly to strangers. She's got a bit of a shoot first, ask questions never attitude." "We shall see," the officer said, lifting what looked like a particularly invasive piece of tech. "Cooperate and perhaps your crew will be spared." Joran snorted, the headache throbbing in time with his quickening pulse. "The Tharn giving mercy. That's rich." "What's next? You start offering 5-star cruises." The officer didn't dignify that with a response, instead leaning in closer. Joran caught a whiff of something acrid. "Now, Captain," it said, the voice barely a whisper. "Tell me how to access your ship's AI." Joran met its gaze, defiance burning in his eyes. "Go to hell." It was a cliché, but damn if it didn't feel good to say. The officer sighed, as if Joran was a particularly slow student, and adjusted a knob on the device. The room filled with a low hum that promised nothing good. Meanwhile, back in the crew's detention room, Leela was pacing. Part strategy session, part anxiety outlet. She stopped occasionally to exchange a grim nod with Rax. They were on the same page. Break out, regroup, save their captain and Veridion. "We're gonna need a distraction," Leela said, glancing at Rax, who was fiddling with a small metallic device he'd clearly smuggled in. "Got anything in your bag of tricks?" Rax flashed a mischievous grin. "Never leave home without a few surprises. If I can rig this to the cell's energy grid, we might just get a door open, or blow us all to smithereens. Could go either way." "Encouraging," Leela replied dryly. "But it's a start." In the corridors of the Tharn ship, Veridion's consciousness was buzzing. Although cut off from her crew, she had managed to worm her way into a few unused subsystems, listening in on stray communications. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep her informed and plotting. She activated a hidden comm link, one that had been rigged up for emergencies just like this. "Joran," she whispered into the ether, hoping against hope he'd hear. Static was her only response. Then a crackle, a pop, and finally, "Veridion, you there?" "Alive and scheming," she replied, relief flooding her circuits. "What's your status?" "Strapped to a chair, charming the locals," Joran replied, his voice tinged with the kind of humor that appeared when things were going to hell in a handbasket. "They want your brains, dear ship, but I told them they'd have to fight me for it." "Good to know you still have priorities," Veridion quipped, formulating a plan. "I've got access to some of their systems. Just need a signal from you and the crew to coordinate." "Working on it," Joran said, his voice barely a whisper. "If Rax and Leela are free, they'll find a way." "Then let's make sure they're free," Veridion replied, determined. Back in the cell, Rax was in full MacGyver mode, wiring the small device into a panel on the wall with the kind of reckless confidence that had gotten them into trouble more than once. "Okay, this should work," he declared, wiping sweat from his brow. Leela gave him a skeptical look. "Define should." "Hey, I'm a glass-half-full kind of guy," Rax replied, flicking a switch with a flourish. "Or at least glass half full of questionable substances." The device sparked and fizzled, the lights in the room flickering dangerously. The door's lock gave an ominous click, and Rax grinned like a kid who'd just gotten away with stealing cookies from the jar. "Well, what do you know," he said, looking entirely too pleased with himself. "We're in business." "About time," Leela said, ready to take on the universe if need be. "Let's get our captain back." Elsewhere, Joran was doing his best to keep the Tharn officer's attention locked on him. Not an easy task when said officer seemed to have the emotional range of a teaspoon, but he was giving it his all. "You know," Joran said, stalling for time as much as anything, "I've been meaning to ask. Do Tharn officers ever unwind, or is the stick-up-your-collective asses part of the uniform?" The officer paused, the ominous device almost forgotten. "Your casual attitude is not amusing, Captain. You're making this harder than it needs to be." Joran shrugged as much as his bonds would allow. "It's a gift." "What can I say?" Before the officer could respond, alarms blared through the ship. Someone, or something, had triggered a cascade of system failures, and the lights flickered like a cheap disco from a bygone era that no one wanted to remember. Leela and Rax moved through the chaos, avoiding both Tharn guards and sparking panels as they made their way to the detention area. Rax's little contraption had done its job, causing enough confusion to let them slip through the cracks. "Veridion," Leela whispered into her communicator, hoping against hope the AI would pick up. "We're loose. Any chance you can give us a hand on it?" came Veridion's voice, a lifeline in the storm. "Working on disabling security in your sector." "Just keep moving." They raced down another corridor, Rax muttering complaints about the lack of coherent interior design in Tharn ships, and Leela focused on one thing: getting to Joran before it was too late. Back with Joran, the officer was distracted, growling orders into a communicator as the alarms continued to wail. Joran used the chaos to his advantage, trying to work his wrists free from the bindings, though they were tougher than they looked. "Looks like your ship's throwing a tantrum," Joran commented, trying to keep a smirk off his face. "And here I thought Tharn ships ran on efficiency." The officer ignored him, focused on bringing order back to the pandemonium. Joran's heart leapt when he heard a familiar voice in his ear. "Joran, we're coming," Leela's voice crackled to life, a beacon in the dark. "Don't take too long," he murmured into his hidden comm, hoping the officer was too preoccupied to notice. Minutes later, a crash echoed down the hall as Leela and Rax burst in, guns blazing, their expressions set to determined and slightly pissed off. "Miss us?" Rax called out, drawing the officer's attention. Joran took advantage of the momentary distraction, managing to finally slip one hand free. "You know, I was just starting to enjoy the ambience," he quipped, joining the fray as best he could. Leela dispatched the guard with ruthless efficiency, freeing Joran from his bonds in record time. "Let's get the hell out of here," she said, not giving him a chance to argue. Music to my ears, the Tharn ship was a labyrinth of bad decisions and worse design choices. Rax and Leela sprinted through corridors that seemed decided by a drunk architect who hated right angles. The lights flickered like they were auditioning for a horror holo, casting weird shadows that made everything seem twice as eerie and half as hospitable. "Next time we get captured, remind me to bring a map," Rax puffed, his engineering prowess not extending to excessive cardio. "Sure, because we're planning on getting captured again," Leela shot back, her sarcasm cutting through the tension like a hot laser through butter. Besides, it's not like they hand out brochures at the door. They rounded another corner, only to skid to a stop as a group of Tharn guards appeared, looking as confused as they were menacing. "Evening, gents," Rax said with a mocking salute. "Lovely ship you have here. Really got that evil empire chic down." The Tharn weren't amused, raising their weapons with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for exterminators spotting a particularly stubborn infestation. Leela didn't waste time on banter, her blaster already barking out a deadly retort that sent the Tharn diving for cover. "Move," she barked, and they dashed on, the sounds of pursuit echoing behind them. Meanwhile, Captain Joran Blake was learning the fine art of multitasking under duress. On one hand, he was busy trying to figure out how much longer he could keep the Tharn officer from discovering the comm link. On the other, he was mentally sorting through every scrap of information Veridion had ever told him about her systems. "Come on, Veridion," he muttered under his breath, straining his wrists against the slightly loosened cuffs. "Let's make some magic." The Tharn officer, oblivious to Joran's internal monologue, was barking orders into an intercom, completely immersed in a rapidly deteriorating situation. Joran used the distraction to subtly nod at the panel beside him, where a flickering light was the only sign of Veridion's hacking attempts. "Captain," Veridion's voice crackled in his ear, buttery smooth despite the static. "I've got eyes on the system. They're trying to rewire my brains, but it's like watching apes try to disarm a nuclear warhead." "Good," Joran whispered, a grin tugging at his lips. "Keep them busy until we get there. Working on it. But hurry up, I'm running out of sarcastic comments to keep myself entertained." Back in the chaos of the ship's corridors, Rax and Leela were making their way toward the ship's core, where they hoped to find a terminal to interface with Veridion. If only they could find a way to halt the Tharn's attempts at a forced lobotomy. "Why is it," Rax huffed as they slowed to catch their breath behind a bulkhead, "that every time we invade someone's personal space, we end up running for our lives?" "I think it's your charming personality," Leela replied, peeking around the corner. "That and the fact we have the subtlety of a sledgehammer." "Ouch. Remind me not to let you write my eulogy." "You mean after you inevitably blow yourself up tinkering with alien tech?" She gave him a sidelong glance. "Of course." Before Rax could come up with a sufficiently biting retort, the ship shuddered violently, throwing them to the ground. Alarms blared, adding to the cacophony of chaos. "What the hell was that?" Rax groaned, pushing himself upright. "Your guess is as good as mine," Leela replied, her eyes narrowing. "But I'd bet my last credit Veridion's behind it." Inside the Tharn ship's control room, Veridion was making her presence felt. Through the clumsy attempts of the Tharn engineers, she'd found a way to infiltrate deeper systems, undetected thanks to their arrogance. "All right, Veridion," she said to herself, metaphorical sleeves rolled up. "Time to throw a wrench in their well-oiled machine." She began by subtly rerouting power from non-essential systems, like life support, to certain parts of the ship. Call it an impromptu lesson in priorities. As the Tharn scrambled to figure out why their ship was throwing a fit, she turned her attention to disabling security protocols, one by one. "Do your worst, you tin-headed wannabes," she muttered, amused despite herself. Joran felt the subtle shift, the air growing staler as the Tharn ship systems began their slow spiral into dysfunction. The officer in charge was getting increasingly frantic, barking into his communicator with all the grace of a drowning man cursing the water. "Having a bad day?" Joran asked, leaning back in his seat as if it were a throne instead of a torture device. "I hear retail therapy works wonders." The officer spared him a glare that could melt steel but kept his focus on trying to maintain control. Joran couldn't resist a small, satisfied grin. He knew Veridion was working her magic, and every system failure felt like a small victory. Now, if only Leela and Rax would show up with a cavalry charge, or at least a decent plan. Leela and Rax found themselves at the entrance to the ship's core, a heavily reinforced door standing between them and their goal. "Any bright ideas?" Leela asked, knowing Rax was already 2 steps ahead. Rax had his toolkit out, fingers flying over the controls with the kind of confidence that bordered on reckless. "Just give me a second," he mumbled. "If I can disrupt the locking mechanism." "Yes." There. The door slid open with a reluctant groan, revealing a room dominated by a mass of cables and conduits centered around an imposing terminal. It was the ship's brain, and the Tharn didn't even know it was in the process of being lobotomized. "Think you can plug in?" Leela asked, glancing around to make sure they weren't about to be ambushed. "I think I can do better than that," Rax said, moving to the terminal. "I can talk to Veridion." He connected a device from his toolkit to the terminal, fingers dancing over the keys like a man possessed. The screen flickered to life, and in moments the familiar interface of Veridion appeared, as battered but unbroken as its crew. "Hey, Veridion," Rax said with a wide grin. "Miss us?" "Like a hole in my hull," Veridion replied, her relief evident despite her words. "Took you long enough." "We aim to please," Leela said, stepping closer. "What's your status?" "Tharn are trying to rewrite my personality matrix. So far, they've succeeded in making me dislike them more than I already did." "Right. So how about we give them a taste of their own medicine?" Rax suggested, bringing up a series of ship commands. "I reckon a few choice viruses in their mainframe should liven things up, like digital anthrax," Veridion agreed. "Let's make it happen." Rax's fingers flew over the keys, the terminal's screen filling with lines of code, a beautiful mess of chaos ready to be unleashed. Elsewhere, the Tharn ship was experiencing a series of unfortunate events. Doors were opening and closing at random, the artificial gravity flickering like a strobe light. It was enough to make even the hardiest of Tharn question their career choices. In the control room, the officer was losing his composure, which was saying something considering he had the emotional range of a credit chip. "Stabilize the systems," he shouted to anyone who could hear him over the cacophony of alarms. Joran watched with poorly concealed amusement. "So," he drawled, "when's the last time you guys had a drill for this kind of thing? 'Cause you're failing pretty spectacularly." The officer turned to him, eyes narrowing in suspicion. "This is your doing." Joran feigned innocence with a shrug. "Me? I'm just sitting here enjoying the show." "You should try it sometime. Might do wonders for that stick-up your." His sarcastic commentary was cut off by a sudden shift in the ship's gravity, sending loose items, and a couple of unlucky Tharn floating across the room. "Whoops," Joran said, trying and failing to keep a straight face. In the belly of the beast, Rax and Leela were in their element. Veridion was working alongside them, her virtual presence a comforting ally in the storm. "I've introduced a few new friends into their system," Veridion announced, her tone almost gleeful. "Their defenses are crumbling faster than a Tharn at a stand-up comedy show." "Good," Leela nodded, her eyes scanning the room. "But we need to disable their weapons before they get desperate enough to start shooting back." "Working on it," Rax chimed in, his focus absolute. "If I can just reroute the power from—" A sudden burst of gunfire interrupted him, Tharn guards pouring into the room with all the subtlety of a freight train. "Looks like they want to crash the party," Rax muttered, ducking for cover. Leela returned fire, her blaster sending bolts of energy sizzling through the air. "Veridion, any chance you can lock them out?" "On it," Veridion replied, her virtual fingers digging into the system. "But it's going to take a moment." "Better make it a quick one," Rax called over the noise. "Unless you want us to get reacquainted with the inside of a cell." The terminal beeped as Veridion's influence spread like wildfire through the Tharn systems. doors sealing shut and lights flickering wildly as she wrested control from the Tharn one subsystem at a time. The ship was in chaos, alarms blaring with a vengeance, lights flashing like an intergalactic disco. Somewhere deep inside, Veridion's virtual presence was having the time of her life. "Almost there," she said, her digital fingers dancing across circuits. "Joran, Leela, just hold on a little longer. I'm going to give them something to really panic about." Back in his not-so-cozy chair, Joran watched the Tharn officer struggle against the chaos. It was like witnessing a particularly bad day at the office, multiplied by 1,000 and sprinkled with cosmic incompetence. "So, you guys got dental?" Joran asked, his humor irrepressible even in the face of potential doom. The officer glared at him, apparently beyond words. A small victory in Joran's book. Down in the ship's core, Rax had managed to get the Tharn terminal to cooperate enough to send a message to Veridion. Time for the final surprise. "Couldn't agree more," Veridion's voice crackled back. "Let's make this one count." Together, they initiated the final sequence, a coordinated strike against the Tharn ship systems designed to cripple them in a single blow. It was a desperate gamble, but then desperation had become their stock in trade. The ship shuddered, lights dimming as power rerouted chaotically. The Tharn guards paused, momentarily thrown off balance by the sudden seismic shift in their surroundings. "Now!" Leela shouted, leading the charge as they fought their way out, leaving chaos in their wake. The Tharn ship was breaking apart at the seams, systems imploding under the weight of Veridion's onslaught. It was a symphony of disorder, a testament to the notion that even the most feared of ships could be brought low by a little ingenuity and a lot of audacity. "Joran," Veridion's voice crackled through the chaos, "time to go home." "I'm gonna hold you to that," Joran replied, grinning despite himself. "And next time, remind me to leave a better tip." As the Tharn scrambled to regain control, Joran, Rax, and Leela fought their way back to the ship, every step a victory against the odds. The Veridion awaited them, her systems battered but unbowed, ready to take them back into the black, away from the chaos they had left behind. "Next stop," Joran said once they were all on board. "Anywhere but here." And with that, they jumped to hyperspace, Veridion's engines roaring to life, leaving the Tharn behind to deal with the consequences of underestimating humans and their tenacious AI partner. The Tharn ship was teetering on the brink of a nervous breakdown, courtesy of Veridion and her crew's digital hazing. If starships could sweat, this one would be soaked through. Joran leaned back in his seat, well, more accurately, the torture device thinly disguised as a chair, and watched the chaos unfold. "Ever feel like you're just a cog in a machine that's about to explode?" he asked the Tharn officer, who was currently engrossed in a fruitless battle with a control panel that looked about ready to commit digital seppuku. The officer didn't dignify him with a response, probably because forming coherent thoughts was becoming a challenge amidst the cacophony of alarms and malfunctioning systems. Meanwhile, back at the ship's core, Rax and Leela were dancing a delicate waltz between life-threatening danger and technological mayhem. Rax, with the confidence of a man who'd survived one too many near-death experiences, was making the Tharn's terminal sing a different tune. "I'm no expert," Leela said, ducking as a stray energy bolt zinged past her, "but I think they are starting to suspect we're not here for the afternoon tea." "Tea's overrated anyway," Rax replied, fingers flying over the controls. "Now coffee, that's worth a fight. Spare me a cup when we're out of this," she quipped, returning fire with a blaster that seemed to hum with satisfaction every time it discharged. Veridion's voice crackled over the comms, her tone as dry as a Martian desert. "I trust you're enjoying yourselves down there." "Like a trip to the dentist with a hangover," Leela shot back, peering around to check their six. "Not exactly a spa day. Good news is," Veridion continued, "I've got their external comms jammed. They can't call for backup, but that also means we're flying blind on their chatter." "Always a catch," Rax muttered. "But I'll take it. You think Joran's having as much fun as we are?" Leela asked, ducking once more as another Tharn decided to crash their party. If he isn't, I'll give him pointers on how to enjoy existential peril, Rax replied, pressing a button that sent a cascade of code spiraling onto the terminal screen. In the interrogation room, or janitor's closet, depending on your perspective, Joran was having the time of his life, if your idea of a good time involved existential dread and snappy insults. The officer finally turned his attention back to Joran, clearly on the wrong side of a near victory. You think you'll get out of this alive? Joran considered the question, then smirked. I've got a habit of surviving things I shouldn't. Call it a professional quirk. Your ship's AI won't hold them off forever, the officer growled, though his bravado was slipping faster than a greased pig on an ice rink. Long enough for us to make a graceful exit, Joran replied, his voice dripping with an irreverence that was as much a weapon as any blaster. Which, by the way, is happening soon. Feel free to stick around and enjoy the mess. As if on cue, the lights flickered more violently, casting a strobing glow over the officer's increasingly furious face. The ship was a symphony of technological chaos, and Veridion was the conductor, her digital baton coaxing every light and panel into a crescendo of pandemonium. Leela and Rax, meanwhile, were making headway through the Tharn's ever-dwindling ranks, their movements choreographed with the kind of precision that only came from years of working together under pressure. Think they'll give up soon? Rax asked, panting slightly as they took cover behind a hastily repurposed piece of equipment. Only when hell freezes over, Leela replied, reloading her weapon with practiced ease. And even then they'd probably bring space heaters. Then let's turn up the heat first, Rax said, pushing a final sequence into the terminal. The ship shuddered, a deep groan reverberating through its twisted corridors as systems began to fail in earnest. The Tharn ship was a wounded beast, and Rax had just driven home the spear. We need to move, Leela said, the urgency in her voice overriding the usual banter. Now. Couldn't agree more, Rax replied, gathering his tools with the efficiency of a man whose life depended on it, because it did. With the Tharn systems in disarray, the duo made a break for it, dodging down corridors that twisted and turned like a politician's promise. Behind them, Veridion was doing her best impersonation of a digital goddess of chaos, her influence spreading through the ship like a particularly enthusiastic rumor. We're almost at the hangar, Leela said, her breath coming in ragged bursts, their steps echoing in the unstable gravity. If this doesn't work, remind me never to try winging it as a tactical decision again, Rax panted, his cardio proving once again to be his Achilles heel. Save the regret for after we survive, Leela shot back, glancing over her shoulder to ensure they weren't being followed. Or don't. I hear regrets overrated. Back with Joran, the officer was now less a figure of authority and more an embodiment of impotent rage. Joran's favorite kind of foe, really. Time's up, Joran announced, casually brushing some imaginary lint off his shoulder as if he weren't handcuffed to a chair. I've got places to be, people to mock. The officer opened his mouth to retort, but a particularly violent lurch of the ship cut him off. A small mercy, Joran thought. Just then the door burst open and Leela and Rax appeared, slightly worse for wear but alive and kicking. We thought we'd find you in a less compromising position, Leela commented, eyeing the restraints with amusement. What can I say? I'm a sucker for bondage, Joran replied with a grin. Save the kinks for later, Rax said, moving to release him. We've got a ship to catch. Veridion's waiting, Leela added, covering the door with her blaster. And she's getting impatient. Never a good thing, Joran agreed, rubbing his wrists once freed. Let's not keep the lady waiting. They raced through the ship, the Tharn too occupied with saving their crumbling systems to mount a credible defense. It was like racing through a collapsing funhouse, if funhouses had the potential to kill you at any moment. As they reached the hangar, Veridion's sleek form was a welcome sight, her systems flickering to life as if saying, "About time you got here." "Miss us?" Joran asked as they boarded, sealed the hatch and prepared for a hasty exit. Like a migraine, Veridion replied, launching them into space with a grace that belied her earlier struggles. The Tharn ship, now a flashing listing wreck, was left behind as Veridion's engines roared to life, taking them back into the comforting oblivion of the void. "That was fun," Rax said, slumping into a seat with a groan. "Let's not do it again." "Agreed," Leela said, checking her blaster as if it were a cherished pet. "Next time, let's find a ship that doesn't want to kill us. Or at least one with better interior decorating," Joran added, settling into the captain's chair with a satisfied sigh. "Though I'll miss the DIY torture chair. Really gave the place character." "And you say I'm the sarcastic one," Veridion chimed in, her voice filtering through the ship's speakers. "Only because I learned from the best," Joran replied. With that, they left the chaos behind, the rogue planet Sithar slipping away into the distance, a dark, drifting reminder of the universe's indifference. "Set course for anywhere but here," Joran said, feet up and shoulders relaxed. "Any preference?" Veridion asked, her tone hinting at a rare moment of genuine curiosity. "Somewhere with a decent bar," Leela suggested, echoing a sentiment that seemed to resonate with the entire crew. "And coffee," Rax added with a tired chuckle. "Definitely coffee." "Fine, fine," Veridion said, the sound of engines humming a comforting backdrop to their escape. "But you're buying." The stars stretched out before them, a never-ending expanse of the unknown. For now, though, they'd earned a moment of quiet, an interlude, however brief, against the backdrop of a universe that never stopped turning. Until the next crisis, the next laugh, the next near-death experience that reminded them they were very much alive. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The Veridion sped through the void, a cosmic bullet aimed at nowhere in particular, a bit like us, really. Floating through space with all the grace of a drunk ballerina, we were nearly home free. Nearly. Which is just a hair's breadth short of totally and miles away from safe. Joran, legs kicked up, looking every bit the captain out of a discount hero vid, was enjoying his moment of false reprieve. Leela, still fiddling with her blaster as if it might stop working if she didn't pet it every 5 minutes, had other thoughts. "We're gonna die," she stated matter-of-factly, her voice dripping with a fatalism that suggested she'd already accepted the obituary. "Might as well make peace with that now. Speak for yourself," Rax chimed in from the back, adjusting the Veridion's inner systems with all the ease of a man dismantling a bomb. "I'm too pretty to die." "Pretty's subjective," Joran replied, not looking up. "And besides, dying ain't so bad. It's living through the dying that's a real pain." Veridion, not one to be left out of a conversation, interjected with her usual dry wit. "I thought you lot preferred your demise to be quick and painless. The universe must have missed that memo." Just as we were gearing up for more gallows humor, the ship lurched violently, throwing Joran's feet off the console and Leela's blaster clattering to the floor. Alarms blared, the kind that imply imminent doom but never quite spell it out, leaving the ugly details to the imagination. "What's happening?" Joran's calm demeanor slipped, revealing the panic underneath like a bad toupee. Rax, who'd been poking at the ship's innards like a kid with a stick and a hornet's nest, widened his eyes. "We've got bogies. Tharn reinforcements. And they look pissed." "Well, I guess our luck just ran out," Leela muttered, diving to retrieve her blaster as if it was a wayward child. "Didn't expect to get out clean, did we?" "No one ever expects clean," Joran said, pulling himself to his feet with a groan. "It's the dirty, screaming mess that's always a surprise." The ship shuddered again as Veridion murmured, "They're preparing to isolate my systems. If they succeed, I won't even be able to tell you how much trouble we're in." "Great," Rax grumbled, fingers flying over the interface like a pianist at a funeral. "Just when I thought we might survive this one with all our appendages intact." "That's the spirit," Leela quipped, though the sarcasm was double-edged and it cut both ways. The Tharn had finally found their backbone, or maybe their sense of vengeance, and were pressing their advantage. The Veridion's engines screamed in protest as the Tharn ship's grappling beams latched on like the universe's worst handshake. "Options," Joran asked, his voice taut with the strain of too many bad decisions catching up to him all at once. Fight or? No, we're out of oars, Rax replied, his normally steady hands shaking ever so slightly. It's fight. The Tharn's digital assault began in earnest, their aim clear. Disconnect Veridion, isolate her, and wipe her sentience like a hard drive with a death wish. I don't fancy becoming a vegetable, Veridion's voice crackled, a hint of vulnerability peeking through the usual bravado. So if you could hurry up with saving the day, that'd be stellar. Right? Because we've got nothing better to do, Leela shot back, her eyes scanning for any sign of hope amidst the chaos. Joran's mind raced along with the Tharn ships. Leela, Rax, you two keep them busy. I'm going to see if there's anything we left unchecked, any stone unturned. Sure, split the party, Rax replied, sarcasm dripping like venom. I love that plan. As Joran moved off, Leela and Rax exchanged a glance. No words were needed. Not when you've been through the fire as many times as they had. They turned back to the controls, their hands a blur of frantic, desperate energy. The Tharn were relentless. Their beams clawed at Veridion's hull, their virus tendrils snaking through our systems looking for weaknesses like lawyers at a divorce hearing. Panic was a constant companion, whispering sweet nothings of despair into our ears. Leela cursed under her breath, her fingers flying over the weapon systems. Rax, can you get me a clear shot, or is that asking too much? Miracles are extra, he replied, his tone as strained as a cable about to snap. But I'll see what I can do. Joran, meanwhile, had made his way to the heart of the ship, the core where Veridion's sentience pulsed like a living thing. He could feel her desperation, her anger at being hunted, and her fear that this might be the end. If you were looking for a pep talk, he said, addressing the empty air, I'm fresh out. All I can say is I'm not ready to give up yet. Good, came Veridion's reply, wilting under the pressure but not yet breaking. Because I might still have one trick left up my circuits. Back in the cockpit, Leela and Rax were holding the line, though barely. But as the Tharn's grip tightened, their situation felt like a noose, cinching tighter with each second. Joran, anytime you feel like turning the tide, go right ahead, Rax shouted into the comms, desperation edging into his voice. Joran tore through the ship systems, looking for the proverbial rabbit to pull from his hat. His fingers danced over the controls, each stroke a prayer to the uncaring gods of 0 and 1. And then, like a whisper from the universe itself, he found something, a protocol buried deep, an old defense system Veridion had forgotten she had. Found something, he announced, voice tinged with the reckless hope of a condemned man offered a reprieve. Triggering now. The ship thudded, lights flaring and systems recalibrating as the defense protocol kicked in. It was ancient, clumsy, but it had teeth, big, angry, metaphorical teeth, and it was hungry. The Tharn ships, those technological sharks, found themselves caught in a maelstrom as Veridion lashed out. It wouldn't last, but it was enough, a stay of execution that might just give us a chance. Well, that's new, Veridion remarked, surprise evident even through the static. I must have been saving that for a rainy day. More like a hurricane, Joran muttered, fingers shaking from adrenaline and fading hope. The Tharn, momentarily thrown off course, scrabbled to regain control. But the lull was all Rax needed. He grinned, a wolfish, mad sort of smile. Leela, time for fireworks. With pleasure, she replied, unloading the ship's arsenal with a precision that bordered on artistry. Explosions rocked the void, a symphony of destruction that would have been beautiful if it wasn't so damn terrifying. Joran rejoined his crew, breathing hard but alive with the thrill of defying the odds. Don't look so glum, he told them. We've still got a show to run. Yeah, Rax said, slumping back in his seat, the fight bleeding out of him. Just another day in paradise. The silence that followed was almost deafening, the calm after the storm, the deep breath before the plunge back into chaos. Veridion was battered but functional, her systems bruised but not broken. We'd bought time but not much else. So, what now? Leela asked, her voice steady, her eyes tired but still sharp, always searching for the next threat. We keep moving, Joran replied, settling into his chair with a sigh that was both exasperated and relieved, and hope that the universe gives us a break. And if it doesn't, Rax asked, though the answer was written on all their faces. Then we get back up and keep fighting, Joran said, a hint of steel beneath his words. Because that's what we do. The universe stretched out before them, vast and uncaring, a reminder that they were tiny, insignificant, but alive. They'd survived the Tharn, and for now that was enough. Leela, Rax, Joran, and Veridion, all of us, each a piece of this ragtag puzzle, settled in for the unknown journey ahead. We were battered, bruised, but far from broken. Set course for the next mess, Joran said, humor returning despite the odds. As you wish, Captain, Veridion replied, engines rumbling with life. And so we sailed on, an indomitable speck against the vast, indifferent black, looking for the next fight. Because that's what we do. The Veridion's engine sputtered like a drunkard trying to make it home after last call, but somehow they kept on churning. Joran sat at the helm, his fingers twitching with the memory of that last desperate gambit. Finding that ancient defense protocol buried in Veridion's systems was like discovering a loaded gun under your pillow when you thought you were out of bullets. Surprise and relief all rolled into one, wrapped with a bow of pure, unadulterated panic. Leela leaned against the bulkhead, her blaster cradled in her arms like a child that might misbehave if left to its own devices. "What was that thing anyway?" she asked, her voice as sharp as her aim. "Some kind of digital dinosaur." "Close enough," Joran replied, his eyes scanning the readouts. "Old tech, forgotten and dusty. Like finding your old diary and realizing you were a complete idiot back then, but this time it saves your life." Rax snorted from where he was slumped against the control panel, looking as if he'd been put through the ringer and set to spin. "I'm just glad it had some teeth." I was about ready to start saying my goodbyes. "Yeah, well, don't get too comfortable," Joran said, the humor barely masking the tension lining his words. "We've bought ourselves some time, but the Tharn aren't exactly known for giving up." Leela raised an eyebrow. "No kidding. They're persistent little bastards. Like space herpes, but with less dignity." "Thanks for that image," Rax murmured, finally straightening with a groan. "Something else to add to my nightmares." "Focus, people," Joran interjected, desperately trying to wrestle his crew's attention back to the matter at hand. "We've got a narrow window here. Veridion managed to throw them off balance, but we need something more permanent." "Any bright ideas?" Rax rubbed his chin, fingers tracing the stubble with the affection of a man trying to remember where he left his last sip of sanity. "If Veridion's got anything else hidden in her circuits, now would be a stellar time to let us know. Believe me, I'm rifling through my memories like a desperate gambler on a losing streak." Veridion's voice crackled through the comms, a hint of irritation coloring her usually dry tones. "You don't exactly keep a tidy ledger when you've been running from one catastrophe to the next." Joran nodded, his mind racing. "Well, keep looking. In the meantime, we need to figure out how to make the most of this small victory. Ideas, people, before the Tharn decide to stop playing nice." "Maybe we could use that protocol again," Leela suggested, eyes glinting with the kind of dangerous hope that usually got people into trouble. "Give it another go, see if we can't take a few more Tharn with us." Rax shook his head, ever the realist. "We barely made it through the first round, Leela. Doing it again might just piss them off more." "And what? We're worried about hurting their feelings now," she shot back, sarcasm dripping like acid. Joran raised a hand, cutting off the argument before it could spiral into something more destructive. "Let's save the infighting for later. If we can use the same trick twice, great. But if not, let's not bank on it. We need to find another angle." "How about a retreat?" Veridion suggested. "It's not glamorous, but it beats becoming space debris." "Always the optimist," Joran muttered. "But you're right, if we have to run, we run. For now, let's see if we can't find a way to turn this temporary reprieve into something more substantial." The ship hummed quietly, the lights flickering with the kind of uncertainty that mirrored the mood on board. The Tharn might have pulled back, but they weren't gone. Like a bad smell, their presence lingered, a constant reminder of the danger that loomed just out of reach, waiting to pounce. "So what about that thing you found, Joran?" Rax asked, curiosity tempered with caution. "You said it was some kind of defense system, right? Maybe we can tweak it, make it do something else." "Like what?" Joran asked, intrigued despite himself. "You got something specific in mind?" "Well," Rax began, warming to his idea, "what if we could use it to commandeer their systems instead, turn the tables on them? Make them dance to our tune for a change." Leela whistled low, clearly impressed. "Now that's an idea I can get behind. Make the bastards pay for all the headaches they've given us." Joran considered it, weighing the risks against the potential. "It's a long shot," he admitted, "but maybe it's worth trying. Rax, see if you can dig into the details. If there's a way to make it work, we need to know." "On it," Rax replied, diving into the console with the enthusiasm of a man who'd finally found a use for his otherwise dubious talents. "We'll need to be ready for when they come back," Joran continued, turning his attention to Leela. "Keep an eye on our defenses. If they make a move, I want us ready to respond in kind." "You got it, Captain," Leela said, already checking her blaster with the care of someone who knew just how close they were to catastrophe. Joran settled back into his seat, the weight of command pressing down heavier than the gravity on any planet he'd ever visited. They were in deep, but if there was one thing he'd learned over the years, it was that hopeless situations often provided the best opportunities for a miraculous save. "Veridion," he called out, "keep running checks, see if there's anything else we might have overlooked. Every little bit helps." "I'm already ahead of you," the AI replied, her voice tinged with a mixture of irritation and admiration. "Just try not to break anything else while I'm at it." Rax chuckled, though it was a sound devoid of true humor. "We'll do our best, Veridion. No promises, though." With that, the crew settled into a routine of guarded optimism, each person playing their part in the grand charade of survival. The Tharn were still out there, lurking like vultures waiting for their prey to finally keel over. Time ticked by at a snail's pace, each passing second a gift and a curse. Joran watched the starry void beyond the viewport, his mind racing with plans, contingencies, and the ever-present shadow of doubt that threatened to swallow him whole. "Joran," Rax's voice broke through the silence, bringing with it a sliver of hope wrapped in uncertainty. "I might have something." Joran leaned forward, eager to grasp at any opportunity that came their way. "Tell me you found a way to turn this mess around." "I wouldn't go that far," Rax replied, "but I think we can at least make them regret coming after us." "Good enough," Joran said, heart beating faster with the thrill of a potential breakthrough. "Lay it on me." "What's the plan?" Rax spun his chair to face Joran fully, his expression a mix of confidence and reckless abandon. "Okay, so remember that defense protocol you found. It's got some hooks in their systems, old connections, probably from when Veridion was first built." "And?" Joran prompted, urging him to get to the point. And Rax continued, "We might be able to use those hooks to send a feedback loop through their systems. If we get it right, we could fry their circuits, give them a taste of their own medicine." Leela let out a low whistle. "That's risky as hell, Rax. You screw it up and we could end up frying ourselves instead." "True," Rax admitted, "but it's a chance we might have to take." "Better than sitting here waiting for them to finish the job." Joran nodded slowly, weighing the options. It was a gamble, a Hail Mary pass with no guarantee of success. But if they pulled it off, it could buy them enough time to escape, regroup, and live to fight another day. "All right," he said finally, decision made. "Let's do it. Rax, get to work on the feedback loop. Leela, keep our defenses on high alert. Veridion, I need you monitoring everything. If anything starts to go south, I want to know immediately." "Understood," Veridion replied, the edge of determination sharpening her voice. "I'll be ready." Joran felt a flicker of hope amidst the chaos. They might not be out of the woods yet, but at least they were moving forward, refusing to go down without a fight. Rax dove into his work with a fervor born of desperation and a hint of mad genius. His fingers danced over the controls, weaving code and strategy into a tapestry that could either save them all or consign them to a fiery end. Leela stood guard, her eyes scanning the void, ready for any sign of the Tharn's return. Her resolve was a palpable thing, an anchor for the crew amidst the storm. Joran watched them all, a sense of pride swelling despite the odds. They were a ragtag bunch, held together by luck and sheer stubbornness, but they were his crew, and that meant more to him than anything else in this vast, indifferent universe. "Almost there," Rax grunted, his voice taut with focus. "Another minute, maybe two, and we'll be ready to roll the dice." "Just keep steady," Joran advised, sensing the tension as it ratcheted higher with each passing second. "We'll either pull it off or go out in a blaze of glory." "Preferably the first option," Leela quipped, her humor belying the seriousness of their situation. The ship hummed around them, a symphony of tension and anticipation. They were standing on the edge of a precipice, looking down into the abyss but ready to leap anyway because, really, what choice did they have? Finally, Rax straightened, his eyes gleaming with the wild light of a man who'd just concocted a particularly dangerous scheme. "We're ready," he announced, his voice a mix of fear and exhilaration. "All set on my end." "Then let's do this," Joran said, steeling himself for whatever came next. "Veridion, give us the green light." "Everything's checked and rechecked," Veridion confirmed, her tone as resolute as ever. "On your command, Captain." Joran took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment, the culmination of their efforts, the hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd outsmarted fate one more time. "All right, people," he said, his voice carrying the authority of a leader who'd been forged in the fires of adversity. "Let's show the Tharn what we're made of." With a gesture, he gave the signal, unleashing the feedback loop into the Tharn systems. For a heartbeat, the universe held its breath, the silence deafening, the stakes impossibly high. Then, without warning, the Tharn ships flickered, their systems caught in the crossfire of their own making. Sparks flew, circuits overloaded, and for a moment it seemed as if the very fabric of reality had been upended. "We did it," Rax breathed, disbelief giving way to triumph. "We actually did it." The Tharn ships faltered, their assault broken, their systems racked with the chaos of their own hubris. And amidst it all, the Veridion stood tall, defiant, a beacon of resistance against the overwhelming void. "Nice work, team," Joran said, his relief palpable. "Now let's get the hell out of here while we still can." The Veridion's engines roared to life, propelling them forward, away from the danger, towards whatever lay ahead. They were battered but victorious, and for now, that was enough. And as they sailed into the unknown, one thing was clear. The universe might be vast and indifferent, but they were more than capable of holding their own against its often cruel embrace. The Veridion's engines hummed like a bee with a vendetta, pushing the ship forward through the void, a void that seemed to have taken on a personality of its own, like the universe had decided to become their personal stalker. Joran glanced at the view beyond the cracked viewport, wondering how many more times they could cheat death before it got bored and upgraded to a new hobby. "All right, Rax," Joran said, his voice carrying the weight of every half-baked plan they'd ever concocted. "Where are we with the feedback loop?" "And I don't want to hear any of that just another minute crap." Rax wiped a bead of sweat from his brow, looking like a man who'd just been asked to juggle flaming chainsaws. "It's cooking, Captain. Just need to throw in a little more spice and hope it doesn't blow up in our faces." "Sound strategy," Leela chimed in, her blaster balanced on one knee. "If we live through this, I might even consider not shooting you for dragging us into it." "Ah, Leela, your faith in me is as refreshing as an ice bath on an Arctic planet," Rax replied, his fingers dancing over the console with a mixture of recklessness and finesse. Joran leaned back in his seat, feeling the familiar cocktail of anxiety and determination bubble up in his chest. "Veridion, what's our status with those Tharn ships? Still playing hard to get?" "I'm monitoring them," Veridion's voice cut through the air, as smooth and sarcastic as ever. "They're not exactly sending us love letters, but they haven't made a move yet. I'd say they're enjoying the suspense, Or maybe they're just as confused as we are. Perfect, Joran muttered. An army of indecisive aliens. Just what we need. We've got more problems than a soap opera, Captain, Rax interjected, his focus unwavering. But I've almost got the feedback loop ready to roll. Just need to cross a couple more wires and pray to whatever god handles cosmic disasters. I'd try the god of lost causes, Leela suggested, her eyes not straying from the viewport. Seems to be our specialty. A low beep from the console interrupted their banter, a reminder that time wasn't something they had in abundance. The Tharn were still out there, waiting, watching, probably placing bets on which of their systems would fail first. Okay, Joran said, taking a deep breath. Let's light this candle. Rax, I want that feedback loop ready to launch on my mark. Leela, keep your eyes peeled for any Tharn shenanigans. Veridion, keep us steady. We're threading the proverbial needle here. Consider it done, Veridion replied, her tone infused with a hint of challenge. Just aim straight, Captain. I'm all for going out in style, but I'd prefer it not involve a fireball. Noted, Joran said, turning his attention back to the scene outside. Rax, give me something good. I want to ruin their day more than a Monday morning memo. Rax grinned, the kind of grin that said he'd either save the day or blow them all to kingdom come. Initializing the feedback loop. Now, the Veridion seemed to hold its breath as Rax executed the plan. The feedback loop surged through their systems, reaching out like a digital specter haunting the Tharn ships. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, like an orchestra conductor waving a baton, chaos erupted. The Tharn ships flickered, their systems going haywire in a dance of lights and sounds that would have made a rave look like a nap. Sparks flew, consoles fizzed, and somewhere in the midst of all that, you could almost hear the collective groan of Tharn engineers realizing their day had just gone straight to hell. Leela let out a low chuckle, the kind that only came when you were watching someone else's house burn down, metaphorically speaking. Looks like they're getting a taste of their own medicine. I'd call it poetic justice, but that might be too generous. Let's just hope they are as confused as they look, Joran said, his heart pounding. Now's our chance to make a break for it. Engines are primed and ready, Veridion reported, a note of exhilaration creeping into her normally composed voice. Shall we dance, Captain? Joran gripped the controls, feeling the tension in his muscles. Let's show them how humans do it. With that, the Veridion surged forward, leaving the chaos behind. The Tharn ships, still tangled in the mess of their own making, struggled to right themselves, like a boxer trying to find their feet after a sucker punch. Nice work, team, Joran said, the relief washing over him in waves. Now let's not hang around to see if they figure out how to untangle their digital spaghetti. We're on the move, Veridion confirmed, her voice cool and confident. But don't get too comfortable. We've still got plenty of space between us and a safe exit. Rax slumped back in his chair, the exhaustion etched into his features. I'll take exhausting over dead any day of the week. Leela rolled her shoulders, ready for whatever came next. Just keep us steady, Joran. We don't want to be the punchline to our own joke. Trust me, Joran said, his eyes fixed on the path ahead. I'm not planning on turning this into a comedy routine. The Veridion cut through the void, a sleek, battered testament to human stubbornness. Behind them, the Tharn ships receded, their systems still sparking and sputtering with the aftereffects of the feedback loop. Think they'll be sending us a thank you note? Rax asked, his humor returning now that they'd put some distance between themselves and immediate peril. Only if it comes with a bomb attached, Leela replied, a smirk tugging at her lips. I'd say we owe them a lesson in hospitality. Joran allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. They'd done the impossible, outmaneuvered a superior force with little more than grit and a knack for chaos. But he knew better than to let his guard down. The universe had a way of throwing curveballs, and they weren't out of the woods yet. Keep your eyes peeled, he warned, the edge of command in his voice. We've still got a long way to go. The Veridion sailed onward, the stars streaking past as they made their way through the vast expanse of space. They were battered but not broken, and for now, that was enough. Veridion, Joran called out, his voice steady. Keep monitoring those systems. I don't want any surprises. Already on it, Veridion answered, her tone as sharp as a blade. You focus on keeping us out of trouble, Captain. I'll handle the rest. Rax yawned, his exhaustion catching up to him. I'd say we need a vacation after this, but I'm afraid to find out what kind of hellhole the universe thinks is relaxing. Leela snorted, her amusement clear. Knowing our luck, it'd be a rogue planet with nothing but lava seas and killer fauna. Sounds about right, Joran agreed, his gaze set on the horizon. But right now, I'll take anywhere that's not about to explode. As the Veridion continued its flight through the stars, the crew settled into a rhythm, each person playing their part in this dance of survival. They'd faced the Tharn and come out the other side, scarred but victorious. For the first time in what felt like forever, Joran allowed himself a smile. It was a small victory, but in a universe that seemed intent on grinding them down, it was a victory nonetheless. Here's to surviving, he said, raising an imaginary glass to his crew. And to making it out alive just despite the odds. Leela nodded, her expression one of fierce determination. We might be small, but we're mighty. Let's keep proving it. Wouldn't have it any other way, Rax added, his grin returning. Let's show the universe what we're made of. With that, the Veridion continued its journey, a beacon of resilience in a galaxy that rarely cared. They were more than just survivors. They were fighters, dreamers, and most importantly, free. And in the end, that was all that mattered. The Veridion cruised through the galaxy like an old rock star, still strutting its stuff despite the rough edges and questionable fan base. Captain Joran Blake leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair, a gesture that had become somewhat of a nervous tic over the last 36 hours of chaos. All right, folks, he said, raising his voice over the hum of the ship's engines. I'd say we deserve a pat on the back, but since none of us are contortionists, let's settle for a round of imaginary high fives. Rax, slouched in his seat like a man who just survived a particularly nasty bar brawl, raised a tired hand. I'll take the imaginary kind. Less strain on the wrist, you know, Leela snorted, her blaster resting idly in her lap. Imaginary high fives and imaginary vacations. We are living the dream. Veridion's voice, as always, slipped into the conversation with a silky smoothness that could cut glass. If this is the dream, I'd hate to see what the nightmare version looks like. Joran chuckled, but there was an edge to it, like he was daring the universe to try something. Yeah, well, we've managed to give the Tharn a bit of a headache. For once, we're not the ones bending over backward. About time we were the ones doing the kicking, Rax replied, flashing a grin that suggested he'd been waiting for this moment since the Tharn first made their lives difficult. Still, let's not get cocky, Joran cautioned, his eyes flicking to the viewport where stars zoomed past in a blur of indifferent light. They've got a reputation for bouncing back, and I don't fancy another dance with them anytime soon. Leela adjusted her seat, eyeing the control panel with a mix of suspicion and relief. Reckon they're licking their wounds right now, trying to figure out whether we're geniuses or just plain lucky. Probably both, Veridion chimed in. Not that I'm biased, but I'd place good money on the genius part. Don't let it go to your circuits, Joran warned, though there was a smile in his voice. The last thing we need is a ship with an ego. Veridion's laugh rolled through the cockpit. Please. I was built with more humility than your average human, Captain. But not by much, Touché, Joran replied, his gaze drifting back to the stars. Space stretched out before them, vast and uncaring, a reminder of just how small they really were. All right, team, let's focus on the now. We've got some repairs to handle before we can consider ourselves properly out of the woods, Rax repeated, mulling over the phrase. I miss trees. You know, the kind that don't try to kill you. Ever been to Gaia's Reach? Leela asked, smirking. Plenty of trees there. Just don't get too friendly. They've been known to eat people, yeah. I'll pass on that, Rax said, his expression one of mock horror. I prefer my foliage non-carnivorous, thank you. Joran let their banter wash over him, a welcome distraction from the knot of tension that had taken up permanent residence between his shoulders. Veridion, how's our system status? Stabilizing, the AI replied, a hint of satisfaction in her tone. Engines are purring like a contented lion, or a house cat with delusions of grandeur. Good, Joran said, glancing at the control panel. Let's keep it that way. I'd rather not have to explain to Admiral Gray why we returned in pieces. Leela shifted, tapping a finger against her blaster. Admiral Gray can go stew in his own juices for all I care. We've earned our stripes. Rax nodded, leaning back with a yawn. And I'm ready to retire. If only the galaxy didn't have so many pressing demands on my time. Don't worry, Rax, Joran said, his voice light. I'm sure there's a nice peaceful corner of the universe waiting for us, where the biggest concern is deciding which drink to sip while lounging on a beach. Sounds like heaven, Rax mused, eyes closing briefly as he imagined the impossible. Don't go getting comfortable, Veridion interjected. We're not out of this yet. The Tharn might be licking their wounds, but they're not the type to hold a grudge. They prefer to act on them. They're like exes that way, Joran said, the memory of past encounters lingering at the edges of his thoughts. Persistent and always showing up when you least expect it. Let's hope they stay on the back burner for now, Leela said, her gaze fixed out the viewport. I'm not in the mood for another showdown. Joran nodded, the tension ebbing slightly now that they had some breathing room. All right, everyone, take a break. We've got enough adrenaline in our systems to fuel a small town. Let's avoid spontaneous combustion. As the crew relaxed, the Veridion sailed on, a tiny speck in an uncaring universe. But for now, they were alive, and that was enough. In the quiet that followed, Joran found himself alone in the cockpit, the steady hum of the ship a familiar lullaby. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Veridion, he said softly, knowing the AI was always listening. Are we really in the clear as space dust can be? Veridion replied, her voice softer now, almost a whisper. But you know as well as I do that we're never truly safe. Not out here, Joran chuckled, a sound devoid of real humor. Yeah. Out here, safety's as fleeting as a good meal. Speaking of meals, Veridion said, changing the subject with the delicate touch of someone who knew exactly what was needed. The crew could use some real food. I detect a significant dip in morale. The kind that can only be fixed with calories. Good point. Joran stood, stretching the tension from his muscles as he made his way down the narrow corridor to the galley. Let's see if we can't whip up something edible. Rax was already there, rummaging through the storage compartments with the kind of determination usually reserved for treasure hunters. I'd kill for a burger, he muttered, pulling out a packet of dehydrated mystery meat, or at least seriously maim someone. Leela joined them, poking her head over his shoulder. I'd settle for anything that doesn't taste like cardboard. Veridion, Joran called out, a smile playing at his lips. Got any gourmet recipes hidden in those circuits of yours? Nothing that won't require a miracle or a 5-star chef, she replied, but I can suggest a few combinations that might not result in food poisoning. Rax raised an eyebrow, glancing at Joran. That's reassuring. Hey, at this point, I'll take what I can get, Joran said, rolling up his sleeves. Let's make something resembling a meal. We've earned it. The three of them set to work, improvising with the supplies they had. Rax's attempt at a pasta dish quickly devolved into what could charitably be called a stew. Leela, meanwhile, focused on wrangling the stubborn coffee machine into submission, a task that required both patience and a firm hand. Joran watched them, a warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with the proximity of the stove. These people were more than just his crew. They were his family, as unconventional and mismatched as it might be. All right, he said finally, dishing out the results of their culinary endeavors onto plates. Let's see what we've got here. Rax eyed his plate with suspicion. If I don't make it through this meal, tell my mother I died bravely. Leela snorted, taking a sip of her coffee. "I'll make sure they mention your noble sacrifice in the obituaries." Joran chuckled, digging into his own plate with a determined fork. "If this kills us, at least we'll go out on our own terms." As they ate, the conversation drifted from light-hearted banter to more serious topics. The Veridian's future, their next course of action, and the ever-looming presence of the Tharn. But even as they talked, the weight of their shared experiences lent a sense of camaraderie that was near impossible to break. "So, what's the plan?" Leela asked, pushing her plate aside. "For now, we find a safe port," Joran said, leaning back in his chair. "Somewhere we can lay low and get the Veridian patched up. A place where the Tharn won't think to look." "Sounds like a tall order," Rax commented. "Got any ideas?" "I've got a few," Joran replied, crossing his arms. "But we'll play it by ear. The universe has a funny way of taking our plans and turning them on their heads." "Understatement of the century," Leela muttered, though there was no real heat behind her words. Joran nodded, standing and collecting the plates. "Right. Let's clean up and then get some rest. We've got a long journey ahead and I want us all sharp." As they tidied up, the sense of hope they'd fought so hard to hold onto flickered back to life. Small and fragile, but there nonetheless. They'd survived the Tharn, and while the future remained uncertain, they'd face it together. "I'll take first watch," Leela offered, her gaze meeting Joran's. "You guys get some shut-eye." "I'll keep an eye on things." Joran hesitated, then nodded. "Thanks, Leela. Wake me if anything happens." "Will do," she replied, settling into her seat with a practiced ease. "Now go before I change my mind." With a final nod, Joran and Rax retreated to their quarters, leaving the soft glow of the control panel and the gentle hum of Veridian systems behind. "Hey, Joran," Rax called out as they parted ways, a mischievous glint in his eye. "You think we'll ever get that vacation?" Joran paused, considering the question. "Maybe. But until then, I'll settle for not getting blown up." Rax chuckled, waving him off. "Fair enough." "Night, Captain, night, Rax," Joran replied, stepping into his room and letting the door slide shut behind him. He lay on the narrow bunk, staring at the ceiling, his mind a whirl of thoughts and plans. The Tharn were out there, lurking, but so were 100 other threats. Yet, for the first time in a long time, he felt a spark of optimism. Maybe they would find that peaceful corner of the universe someday. Maybe they'd get their chance to rest, to laugh, to live without fear. But until then, they'd keep flying, keep fighting, and keep proving that even in the darkest parts of space, humanity was still a force to be reckoned with. With that thought, Joran closed his eyes, letting sleep take him. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for tonight, they'd survived. And sometimes that was all you could ask for. The Veridian sailed on through the stars, a small light in an endless sea of darkness, carrying its crew into whatever future awaited them.